You going to take a sip of your coffee?
Do I need more? I feel like I do.
All right. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
See, I didn't have a jingle today.
Nope, no jingle today.
How you doing, Ben?
Hanging in there.
All is well?
It's been a rough week.
Yeah, has been a rough week. But you know what? We're here. We're here for the people, and we're not going to be brought down.
No, we are not.
Just so everybody is aware, there has been a couple of people that was brought to our attention that have passed away this week from addiction, and it's sad, it's unfortunate, but it just reminds us this is why we do what we do.
Absolutely.
My dog passed away yesterday, Ben.
Yeah, I was pretty brokenhearted when you called me and told me about that.
Mm-hmm.
Tom's like not the most like emotional guy.
Well, if you would have saw me yesterday, you would think otherwise.
Well, I know. I picked up on that on the phone. I said, "Tom, are you crying?"
Yeah, it was pretty unfortunate, but you know, she was a great dog, and we got her right after we got married, and she was coming up on 10 years old. Little Shih Tzu named Maple, and her time was up. That was it. And so I took her to the vet, and I mean, it all happened so quick. I mean, she just started acting really odd, and then lost control of her bowels, and I knew something was up, so took her to the vet, and they, sure enough, said, there's really not a whole lot we can do, and what we can do, it's going to cost you about $7,000, and they can't at that point even guarantee that it's going to do anything. So, we had to make that choice. But
our close friend John Sperry, Friday his dog was fine, and Sunday he had to put down his Rottweiler that was 13 years old.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but So I told my kids this morning, and they handled it pretty well. My son handled it the best out of all of them. So, anyways. All is well. So here we are. Thank you. Thank you for watching on YouTube, by the way, and thank you for listening on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to listen to. And we're here to turn your mess into your message. That's what we're here to do. Right, Ben?
Yes, we are.
All right. So we're going to continue our series on the 12 steps. And today it's another 2-step-a-rooney in one ski. Do you like that?
Yeah. Clever, Tom. Tom's on one today.
Two-step. We're two-stepping today, and we're covering steps 8 and 9 in the 12 steps. And I'm going to beat you to it, Ben. Just saying, we do not represent Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. It's just based off of our own experiences.
Well said.
So for any of you old timers out there that are saying, "Oh, rah, 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 rah," shove it.
Yeah, traditions are important. They definitely are. So we like to make it clear that this is simply our experience.
That's right.
And we do not represent AA. So,
one question for you before we get started.
All right.
Who do you think is going to win between Miami Heat and Boston Celtics?
I watch no basketball.
So the Heat?
I'll just roll with the Heat because I'm from South Florida.
All right. Anyways, go ahead.
All right. So we're on what step? 8 and 9.
8 and 9.
Step 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
There's that word willing again.
I know. Prepare, execute. We keep talking about that on these steps. 8 is the preparation step. 9 is the execution.
Let me pause you here because I think we should at least take 1 minute and go over the first 7 steps because I don't want people to lose track of, how we got to this point. So step 1 is
we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable.
We've identified that we are indeed messed up.
Yes, correct.
Step 2.
Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
So we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I bet you're glad that you're on that page right now, aren't you, Ben?
Yeah, because I'm looking at my notes here, and it reminds me that it's politely telling us that we were insane.
Correct. Step number 3.
Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him.
Yep. You don't need to, it's not you got to become a Christian in order to get this. There's many, many other ways. Step 4.
Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
We took a look at ourselves, Ben.
And we had to discover the truth about the stock in trade.
Yeah. Step 5 is
admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
So this is where we just basically told somebody how screwed up we were.
Correct. And there's a lot of value in telling another human being. And if you want to know what that value is, go back to that episode.
Yep. What step now? 6?
6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character.
These are our character defects. Right?
And are you really willing to get rid of them?
Finding out the things that really make us screwed up.
Yep. And 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings.
We've identified how screwed up we are. Now we're going to ask God to remove them.
In other words, there's no more excuses because once we're aware, now it's a choice.
Once we're aware, we need to prepare to be a better person.
Correct. And we get to do that by doing 8 and 9 and prove that we're really willing to change. I'm glad you brought that up like that.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, because 8 and 9, and I think I mentioned this on the previous episode, but 8 and 9 gives us an opportunity to put the nail in the coffin of being a better person. Like, it's this opportunity to go and demonstrate that we're willing to make things better. So, back to 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Like Tom said, there's that word willingness again. So, let me ask this, Tom. Let's make this interactive.
Okay.
What's the difference between amends and I'm sorry and an apology?
Do you want the answer that I would have given you?
Yes.
I would have said I would have said I don't know.
Oh.
Honestly. I would have said I don't know what amends even means.
Yeah?
I know what I'm sorry means. I say it all the time.
Do you?
But do I mean it? No.
No.
Ask my wife.
I'll follow up with her.
All right.
Amanda, you listening?
No, I do mean it. When I tell her I'm sorry, well, this could be a good way of explaining this. I oftentimes tell my wife I'm sorry. But at some point in time, I'm sorry doesn't mean anything because there's no action behind it.
Spot on, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Amends is followed up with action and the willingness to make something right, where sorry is just... I mean, at this point, if you're anything like me, an alcoholic and drug addict, sorry, like Tom said, just doesn't cut it anymore. How many times did I say I was sorry and wasn't going to do something anymore, and then I repeated the same behavior over and over, and people were tired of hearing I'm sorry. They're like, yeah, you're sorry.
SOB.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So the willingness, let's talk about that. Willingness to make amends. I'd like to point out too, I have my book face down right now, but it says in there, I believe in like the first paragraph of talking about amends, it says, we made the list when we took inventory. That's referring to step 4. It's important to recognize that step 4 is such a big building block of the rest of the steps. So essentially, it's referring to the resentments that we had. Like, I wrote down all the people that I was angry at in my 4-step resentments. But by the time I get through working that step, doing the action, writing out what I'm supposed to write out, that last column in the 4-step is, what part did I play? My mistakes. Was I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, afraid, etc.? Did I say dishonest?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a liar. So if I have that last column filled out and I participated in negative behaviors, then I definitely owe somebody an amends. Now, I want to point out that that list right there started off with me being resentful at somebody. So somebody probably wronged me in some way, shape, or form as well. Now, there is a line in the big book that talks about it's easier to go to a friend than to an enemy, but we find it much more beneficial.
To go to an enemy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the willingness thing. Are you willing to go to somebody and make amends for your part when they did you wrong, and maybe they did you even more wrong, in your opinion, than you did to them? Because what amends is about, it's about clearing your side of the street. And it basically goes on to say we disregard the other person's part 100%. Like, you are not allowed to be critical of them, is one of the ways that it says it. We are not allowed to be critical of the other person. We're there to clean our side of the street. So going to somebody like Tom and making amends to him, that's pretty easy. You know, Tom and I were friends. But if I go to somebody, an enemy, that takes some willingness. But there's more growth in going to an enemy than going to a friend. That makes sense?
Yeah, of course.
It's more of a challenge. Here I am trying to make right a wrong that, heck, I might even feel like that person wronged me even worse.
Well, and there's a lot of situations where they have.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and I think that's part of the process is getting uncomfortable. You know, we oftentimes hear you got to get through the uncomfortable part in order to have the growth that uncomfortability has to offer. And that's not just in the sense of the 12 steps. It's with anything in life. You know, when people get, let's just say, some sort of debilitating, you know, sickness or whatever, it's super uncomfortable, or they end up with some sort of, you know, cancer or whatever. They get through the other side of that, but they now have a new perspective on life. And there's a lot of people that you would hear them say, I'm, you know, not glad that I got to experience it, but they understand and they can see what aspects of their lives have improved because they went through that process.
And I want to say, too, to piggyback off that, the 9-step promises, which get read in every single meeting just about out there, if it's part of the group conscious, says we will be amazed before we are halfway through. Making amends, in my experience, is one of the biggest opportunities to have eye-opening experiences. Thing about amends is I think I know the way that something's going to go. I'm like talking to my sponsor, if I go make amends to this person, here's what's going to happen. And I go make amends to that person, and like the complete opposite of what I thought was going to happen ends up happening. And generally speaking, I mean in a good way. You know, anytime I thought like, oh, it was going to go bad, it ended up being one of the best amends I could have made. And the, you know, water under the bridge, and it led to a lot of really strong relationships in my life that are current today. So let me go back to this willingness thing for a second. My sponsor broke down for me, and this comes from the Joe and Charlie tapes. There are a couple of speakers back from several decades ago, but there's recordings of them. I highly recommend looking them up on YouTube or the podcast app. But they talk about the order that you do your amends in. First, you do the definitelys, the ones you definitely know you got to make. Then you do the laters, the ones that you had to postpone temporarily because you just can't see those people or right away or whatever the case may be. Then after the definitelys, you do the maybes, the ones that you were on the fence about. And then you do the nevers. So there's a progression of, here's the ones I know I got to do. Here's the ones I can't get to just yet, but I'm going to get to them when the opportunity arises. Here's the ones I was on the fence about. And the reason we start doing the ones we're on the fence about is because we've had experiences with the definitelys and the laters that tell us that maybe doing these maybes might end up being something good. And then these maybes that you were on the fence out on, you end up having a good experience with, and you're like, you know what? Let me do those nevers. And earlier I touched on the fact that we made a list when we took inventory in the fourth step. Like, we definitely, in most cases, owe amends to the people on our resentment list because we probably played a part. But there's also people that I didn't have a resentment towards that I also owed amends to. There was, blameless. What's the book say? Blameless wives, children, and the like, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Sad wives, husbands. I'm not getting it 100% right, but there's definitely people out there that I've harmed that did me no harm in any way.
And I think that that's going to be the vast majority, at least from my experience. The majority of my amends were people that I had harmed. Not so much the people that I had resentment towards and stuff like that. But it was at least in my experience, and I think it's going to be most people, and we look at this process as, okay, who did I do wrong in the past? And those are the people that I need to make amends to. But I do like what you said and bringing up the point that it's not just that, it's even the people that have harmed us and, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely where the real growth is. So I mean that's step 8, growing in the willingness to make amends to those people, and that's why I brought up the enemies right away, because it takes more willingness to do that than people that are just going to be like, oh, okay, I forgive you, just stay sober and do a better job. So I don't think I'm missing anything I wanted to touch on. So on step 9. Sorry, got to clear my throat. Step 9, the actual making amends. So my sponsor gave me a formula to stick to. Tom, here's what I did to you. Here's what I'll try to do in the future. Did I leave anything out, Tom?
No.
Oh, cool. Tom, how do you want me to make it right?
I feel like you're doing pretty good, Ben. Just keep doing what you're doing.
So this formula that I was given to me, and my sponsor told me, you are not allowed to make amends until you can stick to that formula. Here's what I did to you. That's me owning my side of the street. Remember earlier I said we are never to be critical of these other people. I'm there to talk about what I did. Here's what I'll try to do in the future. That's straight out of the big book. You tell them what your intentions are and how you're going to try and live differently. Did I leave anything out? A lot of the times, I thought that I knew how I hurt people, but a lot of the times I left a lot. I didn't even think about some of the ways that maybe I hurt them, and I give them the opportunity to tell me, hey, you actually hurt me in these ways too. Or maybe there's times I was blacked out and I just simply don't remember things that I did. It could be that simple. But a lot of times we affect people in ways we don't even realize.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things too that a lot of times when people think about the amends process, they think, and I like the formula because the formula draws attention to this stuff. It's not just going and saying I'm sorry for what I did. Like the question that you asked me, did I leave anything out? It's a very open-ended question. It gives me an opportunity, the person that you're making an amend to say, okay, yeah, maybe, yeah. Hey, Ben, do you remember that, time that you did X, Y, and Z? And maybe you don't, but it gives me an opportunity to say what that is. But then it also gives you an opportunity. So it's like, gives you an opportunity, and it might make you uncomfortable because you don't remember that. You don't remember when this took place. And so now you got to navigate that too, which leads me into, and I don't know if you're ready to discuss this, why it's important that this step is where it's at. Because we have a lot of times people come in here, they do 1, 2, 3, and then simultaneously they're making amends with all these people because they don't know, or they're just in like they're, super sober or whatever. Oh, I got to, make amend to this person, this person, this person. You're not there yet. And there's a reason why it is step 9.
So there's a few points to this. The last part of that formula, Tom, how do you want me to make it right? Am I really willing to hear it from somebody else on how to correct the matter? Because if I'm not ready for that, I'm not ready to make amends. And that is tough. Are you really willing to take it from somebody? That takes courage. It takes growth. It takes open-mindedness. The other reason these go in order, what are our motives in making the amends? This is really, really important. We have clients that come to Rock all the time, and they're here in week 1, and they're literally trying to make phone calls to make amends to family members and friends and whatnot, girlfriends, baby mamas, etc. And let me throw it at you like this. If you're making an amends so that you can put your head on your pillow at night, that's not an amends. If I'm looking for peace for myself, because there's something I want to touch on. Step 9, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Do I fall under them or others? Nope, I do not. I do not fall under them or others. Therefore, I can't save myself at the expense of someone else, so to speak. And I have to look at my motives. Are they selfish or not? And what I wanted to get to in this podcast is give some real examples too. One of my favorite examples ever, and this guy, I've known him forever. I'm good friends with his family, his mom, all that stuff. I won't say his name on here. If he hears this, he'll know I'm talking about him. But so one time, working in a treatment center, and I ran a group on amends. And this was this guy's very first group. He just so happened to be there that day. He had previous experience with trying to get sober before, so he was familiar with the steps, pretty well versed actually. But he comes in and he brings up in the group how he wants to make amends to his girlfriend. I'm like, and the whole group, we're like, bro, you're on day 1 here in treatment. Your girlfriend told you get out. You do not need to be making amends to your girlfriend right now. Point blank, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The next day, he comes in, and because at Rock, we allow you, or the treatment center I was at then, we allowed you to have your cell phones. And he comes in the next day in the group, head hanging low, tail between his legs. We're like, what happened, dude? I did exactly what you and the group told me not to do. I went and I called my girlfriend to make amends. And she laid into me. And I'm like, oh, really? How'd you do that? Did you call her? No, I texted her. So he text messages this girl an amends. And I'm like, oh, perfect. Why don't you go ahead and pull your phone out and read this to the group? Listen how this amends starts. So-and-so, I need you to understand that was my active addiction and not the real me. Right there, my jaw hits the floor. I'm looking at this dude. I'm like, and that is why you are not ready to make amends. An amends does not start with telling somebody else what they need to do. I need you to understand. Excuse me? He got the point. And that's why it's so important to stick to that formula.
Even when you're not making an amends, that's just, you don't communicate to people in that way. No. If I want something done from somebody, I don't go to them and say, I need you to understand, I need you to do this. That just doesn't work.
And the big book talks about in previous chapters, the root of our problem is not our alcohol, it's not our drugs, it's the fact that we are selfish and self-centered. That's the root.
Yeah.
Not the only problem, but it's the root. But with that being said, case in point, what was his motive? Try and get back together with his girlfriend? Maybe,
do I know this person?
Maybe try to get laid?
Do I know him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know him well.
Okay,
I'll tell you after.
All right.
Yeah. You'll chuckle when you hear after. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's a good friend of ours. But, yeah, so where was I going with this? The motive part. You need to check your motives is what it comes down to. Why are you making the amends? That's why they go in order.
Yeah.
Most people, and let me tell you something, making an amends the way that it's meant to be made is really scary. So I thought about it too. Like I was talking earlier, I wanted to give some examples of amends, for instance, that I made that the outcomes ended up being way differently than what I expected. I'll touch on one, and this one involves my wife Whitney. So sorry, Whitney, if I'm putting you out there, but
Does she even listen?
No,
Okay.
I don't think she cares anyway. But with that being said, Whitney and I actually met at an Applebee's in Minnesota. I was a bartender. She was a server, and we were both in our active addiction at some point after. I think I worked there for like 4 years, and she probably worked there for like 8 or something like that from the time she was 16 to whatever. But the waitresses used to keep their purses in the side station by the side door. Well, Whitney, I got blamed for it, but Whitney went into this girl's purse that we work with and stole $800 out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This girl was dead set that it was me and kept saying, oh, she's going to have the police come in, a private investigator, this, that, the other. But in my head, I'm like, it wasn't me. But I will throw this out there. I was just as guilty because Whitney and I, as soon as we walked out of the restaurant, Whitney's like, I got this $800, and we went and grabbed some oxys right away. So, I definitely wasn't opposed to what she did that night. Definitely played a part. But here's where I'm going with this. So her and I moved back to Florida. We went back to Minnesota like 3-4 years later, something like that, just to visit. And we end up going, we have family that wanted to meet us at the Applebee's that we worked at. So we walk in. Lo and behold, this young lady that we took the money from ends up being our server.
Oh, my.
And this girl, like when I tell you, when I left Minnesota, she thought it was 100% me. This girl hated me so bad. And, we're sitting there, we're having dinner, and she's being cordial with us, I'm assuming because she's our server and really has no choice, but afterwards, Whitney and I ran to the ATM and brought back some cash and run inside and said, hey, we stole the money. Here's your money back. Put a little extra in there on top of it. And the girl looks at us and says, I hated you two so much. And she didn't want to take the money. She's like, I don't want the money. She's like, something happened after you left. She said after she left, her husband became addicted to meth. And she was like, I hated you two so much, but now my husband is going through meth addiction. And she's like, I understand you both, and I want to let you know that I love you both. And Whitney took the money and jammed it in her apron and ran out. Like, didn't really give her a choice but to take the money. But it was just funny. Had we not gone back to the restaurant with that money, with the intention of making amends, like that moment wouldn't have happened. And for us, that I would consider that like a spiritual experience. Point is, in making the amends, we went from hate to love because of a simple action of an amends. And now that person, I'm sure it could be somebody part of our life, like that's important to us. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So
yeah, and she has something to share too. About,
exactly.
And so that's pretty cool. I don't know. I'm sure you've told me that story before. But.
Yeah. So, and then there was another one this one's kind of funny, except when to do so would injure them or others. I had a couple of roommates, and they were dating forever, and we were all doctor shopping at the time, and her boyfriend set it up and blamed me for stealing her script of Roxy's and Oxys. It wasn't me. To this day, I'm telling you, it wasn't me. I own it at this point. It was not me, but we and this dude is, I'll just throw it out there, he's dangerous. Like, he's a dangerous dude. Did time in prison, was involved in some really violent stuff. Like, scary guy. One of them dudes, he's like twice my size. Just nuts. But anyway, so I get back to Florida after being in Minnesota for a few years, and I am going around town. I'm like 3 years sober at this point, and I'm not kidding you, Tom. I'm like looking over my shoulder all the time, like, all right, I heard this guy got out of prison. I'm like, because they wanted to kill me. They both hated me, and I'm also like afraid of her at this point too, and so here I am with 3 years of sobriety, looking over my shoulder at all times. It sucked. One night, I go to pick up a sponsee from a halfway house, and I have dark tint on my windows at the time on my Infinity, and I see this girl sitting out front, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so-and-so. And I leave my windows up, and my sponsee jumps in my car, and we drive away. And I'm like, there's no, except when to do so would injure them or others. I didn't know where he was. I didn't want her to let him know. I didn't know what their situation was. I'm like, I'm not getting injured. I'm not saying anything. I'm not doing. Anyway, I pull back in to the apartment to drop my guy off, and she's still sitting out front. And something came over me. I'm like, I could just like, something just told me, Ben, I definitely owed this girl an amends for like a lot of, she had done me wrong. I had done her wrong. There was some parts I played. But I go ahead and I jump out of my car, go make amends to this girl. And she just looks at me. She basically, the second she saw me, ran up and gave me a huge hug. And I was like, well, I was here to make amends to you. She looks at me and goes, for what? And I like tell her all this stuff. And she's like, I was eating so much Xanax, I don't even remember what you're talking about. I'm like, oh my God. So here I am looking over my shoulder for 3 years.
Yeah.
And this girl has no idea, like I'm scared to death.
What about the guy? Touchy subject?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those are a couple good stories, and I think it goes to show that, again, why these are in the place that they're in, because you wouldn't be able to do these things had you had 30 days clean.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a few years of sobriety when these and it goes back because you lived in Florida. You didn't fly to Minnesota with the intention on making this amend. When opportunity presents itself, you'll make the amend. An opportunity presented itself, you made the amend. Same with this girl. You're not going to go seek her out to make this amend because you thought you were going to get murdered, but opportunity presented itself, you made the amend, and it was good.
Yeah. And
so these amends take time. I mean, it's not something that you make all of these amends it's not that you can't move on to step 10 until you complete all of these amends.
That's a really good point. Look, because I'll throw this out there. Like, I've made a lot of amends. There are still amends I have to make. When the opportunity comes, I mean, if I look back at my personal training days and old employers and literally I owe amends probably to thousands of people still. Like, and I am not exaggerating. Like, it's going to be a lifelong process for me. It really is. It's amends is something that, at least in the time of my active addiction, as long as I was doing it and as bad as I was, I can imagine I'm never going to get through going face to face to everybody I owe an amends to. Like, it's.
So
I
think to wrap this up, one thing that I would say is this process, you have a sponsor for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be people in the amend process that you may or may not know whether or not you should or should not make an amend to that person. And that's where you need to utilize your sponsor, because there have been situations, not only with myself, but with others that I've worked with, where eager to make an amend to such and such person, but my sponsor tells me that's not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And if it weren't for me asking, I would have gone and done it anyway. And it could have been, one of those situations could have injured them or others, So if you've, if you have one of those situations where making the amend to somebody could be detrimental to them or to somebody else, then you need to talk to your sponsor and find out how you're going to go about doing that and let them guide you in that.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, this one is actually, it takes some experience, and it takes some guidance, definitely from a sponsor and from people in sobriety that have had similar situations. Because you bring up, for instance, there are situations where if someone generically asks me like, "Oh, do I go make amends to my drug dealer?" I in early recovery, I'd probably be like, "Well, no," because chances are you're putting your sobriety at risk. And then if your sobriety is at risk and you relapse, then you're going to be injuring more people. But also, I'll just throw it out there. There's situations where, maybe you owe money to a drug dealer, and don't get me wrong, like, I'm not saying do this, don't do this. I'm just generalization. Like, if you don't go pay back this $2,000, this is the kind of drug dealer that'll kill you. And you need to be there for your family. That's why we got sober. Like, I can't take care of my family if I'm dead. So there's all kinds of situations out there, and it's really, really important, again, to look at your motive. Am I wanting to go meet with my drug dealer and make amends to him so that I can get high again? Or is there truly like a really good reason to do so? Tom, I'm going to say sorry. I'm not going to make amends, but we can't wrap it up just yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm telling you. I'm not asking you.
All right.
We have to talk about Eminem.
Eminem.
I've brought this up in regards to other parts of the podcast and other steps, but primarily it pertains to steps 8 and 9. Everybody, well, most people have seen the movie 8 Mile.
Yeah.
So, at the end, during the rap battle,
Yeah.
how does Eminem win the rap battle?
He tells the guy everything that he's gonna. He already knows. He basically says everything that the guy is gonna say about him.
Yeah. So, in the end of 8 Mile, Eminem wins the rap battle by owning everything, all his character defects, shortcomings, all his embarrassing stuff, all his stuff that was, hurt his pride, etc. Amends is the same way. You take ownership of what you've done and who you are. And once you've made amends, the other parts of that, if I go make amends to Tom and Tom tells me to screw off, I've done my part. Mm-hmm. I made the attempt to clear my side of the street. Not all amends are going to work out, like you would hope that they would. But as long as I was willing to do my part, it's a demonstration of my principle to that person, to myself, and to the rest of the world. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to live my life by principles. Eminem owned who he was. Therefore, he could no longer be held hostage by that other guy in the rap battle. What was the other guy going to say about him? Eminem called himself white trash. He did. I have a friend named Cheddar Bob that shot himself in the leg and all that stuff. So, the other guy did sleep with his girlfriend. He owned that. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
that's a good example.
He called himself out.
Yeah.
And took away all the ammunition from the other guy. And that's what making amends is about.
Cool.
So.
Good stuff.
I feel like there's more. But
I think we covered it pretty well. But, like I said in other podcasts, if you want to get in more detail, you can always send us an email, tom@realrecoverytalk.com and ben@realrecoverytalk.com. And, we can have a conversation with you. We're not going to be your sponsor, but we can, have a couple-minute conversation if needed. And
that is the last little thing I wanted to say. A lot of times I would go make amends and people would make amends back. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when I went to an enemy and I was the first one to act on these principles, they turned around based off of what I did and did the same. And some of my relationships today, people that I absolutely hated, that absolutely hated me, are some of the most important people in my life today.
Very good.
From hate to love.
Hate to love. And love this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, like I said, you could always reach us, tom@realrecoverytalk.com and ben@realrecoverytalk.com. And we're helping you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
Correct.
That is it. We will see y'all later.